What is up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up a crayfish fly pattern. This is a pattern I use fishing for a lot of trout, bass, anything that eats a crayfish. This is typical colors I fish it in, kind of that rusty orange. We're going to start this on an Ahrex hook. This is a TP 650. It's got a 26 bend right behind the eye. I fish these in 1/0, 1s and 2s, sometimes 4s, but primarily in those sizes. We've got a new fluoro wax thread by Semperfli. This is an 8/0. I've got it wound onto a Norvise bobbin, and we'll start our thread, trim out our tag end, and we are using a Norvise rotary vise, so I'll just go ahead and lay down a nice thread base here on the shank of the hook, working my way back into the bend, and we'll go ahead and build up a little bit of a thread ball here at the back because we're going to be building a small dubbing ball to start this pattern. So for the body, and we're primarily going to use this Cohens Carp dub. This is a rusty orangey color. It's got a little bit of blue and olive in it, and we'll just dub on a little bit of this to our wax thread. We don't need to spin it up the way the vise wants us to do it. We're just going to put a little ball, and if it gets a little loose on you, that's fine. Just use some securing wraps and then fold it back over itself, and then make sure you secure kind of a reverse tying in method here so that it forms a little ball. I kind of want a little bit of a bigger one for these crayfish or crawdad imitations. That way it helps to kind of just start the foundation of spreading everything apart. So we'll just add a little bit more dubbing now, and then pull that back and really crank down some touching wraps right here. And we'll go ahead and advance our thread up to the middle of the shank, and we're going to make our eyes. So for the eyes, I just used some 30-pound mono. This is some fishing line. I think it's like $6 for 200 yards. That's a lot of eyes. I'll just cut off about a 3-inch strip, and I'll go ahead and just lightly burn it just to form a little bit of the shape of the eye. Not too much. We're going to be adding some resin to this, so I'll just do the same to the other side. And I don't cut these and separate them at this point, and I just kind of we'll fold them in half here in a minute, but I'm just using a little bit of black resin here, just putting a really light coat right over that little ball we just created. Therefore, you didn't need a big, when you're burning it, you don't need a huge ball because we're applying the resin, and that adds a little bit of bulk to it, or makes the eyes appear bigger. And we'll go ahead and cure this up now with our UV light, just for a 5-second quick cure. And you may see a little bit of smoke when you do this, but just kind of rotate it around, trying to hit it from all angles. And for most of my eyes, you could just be fine and done right there, but I'm going to apply just a little bit of a heavier resin, just brushing it on to give a nice even clear coat around these, a little shinier, more eye-like, I guess, so that it doesn't appear that that dully black color. So we've got the 2 coats here on this. We're going to cure it a little longer, about 6-7 seconds on each side, making sure to rotate it around, because if you just cure the one side, the other side could still be uncured. So it's important to rotate that eye 360 degrees. So we just did our eyes that quick. I'm going to fold them so they're bending, using that natural curve of the fishing line being on the spool to force those eyes apart. I'll create kind of an X right here, and we'll go ahead and tie that in right there at the X, trying to keep it on the top of the shank. And then we will advance our thread back to, let's check our eye placement there. I might want this one just a tad bit longer, and so just work your thread back to the back here, and you can adjust the length slightly, and those are looking really good. So just tie them up, but make sure not to go into that ball, because that ball is what's kind of separating them. I kind of do a figure 8 sometimes to just really secure and make sure those are in. If they're spread too far apart, just do a few more wraps back, and then we'll go ahead and secure that thread, that mono, all the way along the shank of the hook for a nice uniform body and end at the bend. So go ahead and trim that out. Checking our eyes one more time, looks good. So we'll trim out that mono, and we are golden. So we'll just advance our thread back to the beginning of our eyes, probably even at this point with almost the point, and we'll make a small dubbing loop. And the small dubbing loop, we're just going to tie in a little bit of Marabou. And so we'll get our thread out of the way. We'll put in our dubbing loop tool. This is a Stonfo Elite Roto Twisting Dubbing Tool, I believe. And we're using for our Marabou, this is some premium Bugaboo by Nature's Spirit. Every feather is amazing. As you can see, I've been using this for about, I'm on my 9th or 10th right now, and so I'm just going to pluck off about 3/4 of an inch. I'll slide it into my dub loop, and we're going to slide it in so it's about, the butt ends are not quite as long as the tips. And if you have any, butt ends that are really stuck together, go ahead and trim that off if you've got any of the stem with it. We'll spin it up, and what we're going to do with this, the purpose of this is, one, add a little bit of fluff in there that's going to mat around those eyes, and two, kind of make another poof ball here. So we're going to wrap these first few wraps right on top of one another, and making sure to preen those fibers back. I'll get my thread out of my way, and now I'm going to start wrapping just slightly forward, but trying to overlap these wraps as best I can. And you can go as heavy or as light as you want. This is probably light average. I usually go a little heavier, but that's going to look pretty good. So the next step we're going to do is just tie that off and leave our thread right here towards the back at this point. So the next material we're going to tie in are our antenna. So I'm just got a orange crawdad speckled leg here. This is on a tab, so I'm just going to pull off one fiber, or one rubber leg, sorry, and we're going to divide that leg equally in half, wrap it around our thread, and go ahead and secure it on the top of the shank at this point. And then as I'm pulling backwards, I'm not pulling on these legs too much, but I want them to be on each side, but kind of above the middle point, so not directly on the side, but more up on the middle. And we're not going to wrap it all the way back to the Marabou, because if I push those up against the Marabou, they're going to stick right out. And so we're going to end with maybe 2-3 thread wraps between the Marabou and those legs, and we're going to get our thread back to the midpoint here, and we're going to tie in the next material, which is this voodoo fibers. These are really cool for barring segmentation and adding a speckleness to this. So we're going to cut out about 8 to 10 fibers here, and this stuff's really thin, really sometimes a little bit difficult to work with, but it's just so awesome. And so we're just going to flying V that, similar to how we did our rubber legs, but we want to make sure that I keep those in a tight grouping where it comes off. I don't want it to fan out, and then I'll trim them about half a length longer than the eyes, and they're going to kind of go everywhere. But what I want is the rubber legs to be the antenna to be really long, and then we're going to use that to kind of accent our claws. And for our claws, we're just using a Zonker cut strip here, and this is in crawdad. I don't really have any special tools for measuring these. I just usually cut a strip in half, and then out of this remaining half a strip, I'll get 2 arms. And I've known since I've been tying a bunch of these that I want this just to be a little bit shorter. So you can see right there, that's about double the length of the shank. I like mine to be 1.5 times this, overall hook or shank length. So we'll go ahead and snip off just a little bit there. Now for my arms, you don't have to do this, but I'm just kind of trying to decrease a little bit of bulk at this point. So I'm going to strip off most of this hair on the part we're going to be tying to the shank. And you don't have to tie these in the whole shank length. You can tie them in at the back. It creates uniformity and makes it a little bit easier, and so I'll just basically tie it in on the side of the shank to the bend, and then double check that I like where it's at. And then as I'm pulling back, wrapping backwards, I'm kind of pulling just a little bit, and I'll end right there where we ended with our rubber legs, and put about 5 to 6 good wraps right there. So you can see we're slightly longer, about 2 lengths of the eye in length, and that looks about right. So we'll go ahead and strip the fluff off the other arm at this point, and we'll tie it in on the opposing side of the shank of the hook. And I just like to double check. Yeah, that looks pretty good, and it looks like our claws are even as well. And so we'll go ahead and do some wraps here. and then work our way back. And as we work our way back, just making sure that's positioned kind of going straight back. I like it to go more even than, some guys will tie it with a directional going up or down. I like them going straight back, especially on this bent hook, because it's going to cause less fouling and look like claws. So we'll go ahead and clean up this body just a little bit here with some nice wraps, just using the rotary function here, and that looks pretty good. So now we're moving into our body of the fly. We've got the back end pretty much done. So we will go ahead and tie in a product by Fly Skins. This is Exo Skin, and I apologize, I don't know the color of this. I'll look it up and post it down below in the description in the recipe. But I want to cut it so it's in a strip just slightly wider than the body, because we're going to be adding a dub body to this, and so we got to anticipate that. And so I'll just cut a little strip, and I'll notch the tip for tying it in, making sure we're tying in the shiny side down at this point, because we're going to flip it over, and then we will tie that in with some nice securing wraps and just leave it back to the side. We're going to be also tying in some 0.2 millimeter wire. This is red by Semperfli. Really durable stuff. I recommend, they've come out now with a 3 millimeter, 0.03 millimeter wire, and that just is going to be even stronger. But we're not too concerned with weight on this fly, and you want to make a dubbing loop, and don't do what I just did. I'll kind of clean that up here. And we'll advance our thread up to the bend. I'll put my dubbing loop tool in to hold this in position, and we are now ready to tie on our dumbbell eyes. So for these, I'm using a medium black. You can actually use large or extra large. I just don't really need that extra weight. I'll be fishing this in pretty shallow water. 5 to 6 feet primarily, and I don't really need that extra weight to really dig in and get snagged on a lot of the undergrowth, and this will allow me to get down quick so I can start stripping almost immediately after I've cast, but also not be super heavy when I'm casting it all day as well. And I don't have to worry about the duck and chuck or something like this nailing me in the back of the head as much with the extra large dumbbell eyes. So at this point, let's secure this bad boy. We're going to lay down some super glue. This is not the gel, this is just regular super glue. 1, to keep those lead eyes where I want them. 2, to kind of solidify all that rabbit fur and everything we've tied in. And also because we're now going to dub this body, and so we're just going to put in some more of this Cohens Carp dub. It's got rubber legs in it. It matches, I wouldn't argue perfectly the crayfish or crawdads I see here in my local waters, but it really helps to mimic that blue shimmer with that blue in there. It's got that rusty orange. To me, it looks good. And I guess I could have spread out that dubbing a little bit more. We got a pretty big poof ball here. So don't do that when you tie yours up, but this will still fish. So I'm going to just continue here. I'm not going to undo it because that would be a pain in the butt. So I usually just bring that dubbing right over the eyes at my last wrap. I don't figure eight it. I just, this is going to be the bottom side that we're, the top's going to be the bottom. So just by covering our thread wraps there with a little bit of dubbing is all we need, and we'll tie it off. Now, at this point, we're going to pull the exo skin over, and you want to just use your bodkin when it's stretched a little bit tight, poke a hole, and then remember where that, I lost it, crap. You really want to remember where that hole is, because it's super hard to find once you've lost it, and I have lost it. So we're going to add another hole. So let me grab my bodkin again, and we'll go ahead and puncture that, slip it in and through. That one a little bit better, and we'll do about 4 wraps here with the exo skin included, just trying to make sure it's centered, and then I'll do a couple wraps underneath without, just on the bare shank there. Now we're going to palmer our wire up and just do even spacing. You want about 6 wraps here, and it helps to have a good piece of wire. I might have cut this one a little bit short, so we might have to do a little bit more sparse on the wraps here, but this is just mainly, one, to hold that exoskin in place, and two, kind of keep everything secure and awesome. If you've got extra wire, sometimes I do a figure 8 kind of cross around those eyes, but since I was using the last bit of a little bit, I'll just end it there with about 5 wraps up that exoskin, kind of extra solidifying that carp dub in place. We'll snip that with about the length of the bend of that hook from the bend to the eye, leaving that exoskin tag end off. I'll do a whip finish around the exoskin, and then I'll do a whip finish without. And it looks like I got a little bit of super glue on that exoskin. This is just to kind of add a little bit more bugginess up front, and you'll still fish pretty good. So we'll go ahead and snip out our thread at this point. We did a double 2 whip finish, and so we got 2 steps left at this point. The first step is we're just going to trim little slits in this exoskin here at the front. I usually get about 3 or 4 cuts in, just evenly, trying to cut it back to as close to the tying point as possible, just adding a little bit of flair and stuff to that. And then the last step, of course, is brushing this out. And I really need to brush this extra because we had that big clump in there, but you can see it's already out and looking really buggy. I love this dubbing because I used to have to tie in a ton of rubber legs. Now I just tie in the dubbing and we're good to go. So that looks like a crayfish to me. Looks fishy, good hook. It's going to ride inverted, and it's going to pierce lips. So can't wait to fish this. Good pattern, good color scheme, so tie some up, fish them in your local waters, and I hope they pierce some lips for you.